Greetings from Cefer Publishing Group, and welcome to another Cefer Moments. I'm Dr. Stephen Pidgeon. Today we're going to be talking about some more fun things. In particular, we're going to be talking about a passage that is found in Zechariah or Zechariah, chapter 5. Now this is a passage of some interest given the modern day because it discusses this thing that is called a flying roll. And we want to take a look today at how the Cefer sets it out, compare it with the underlying Hebrew, and also talk a little bit about the Septuagint and its formulation on this passage. So what you see is, you see this passage that says in Zechariah 5:1, at least in the KJV, it says, "Then I turned and lifted up mine eyes and looked, and behold, a flying roll. And he said unto me, What seest thou? And I answered and I said, I see a flying roll, and the length thereof is 20 cubits, and the breadth thereof is 10 cubits. Then said he unto me, This is the curse that goeth forth over the face of the whole earth. For everyone that stealeth shall be cut off on this side according to it, and everyone that sweareth shall be cut off as on that side according to it. I will bring it forth, saith the Lord of hosts, and it shall enter into the house of the thief, and into the house of him that sweareth falsely by my name. And it shall remain in the midst of this house, and shall consume it with timber and thereof, and the stones thereof." Then in Zechariah 5:5 it goes on to say, "Then the angel that talked with me went forth, and said unto me, Lift up now thine eyes, and see what this is that goes forth. And I said, What is it? And he said, This is an ephah that goeth forth. And he said more, But this is the resemblance throughout all the earth. And behold, there was lifted up a talent of lead, and this is a woman that sitteth in the midst of the ephah." Okay, all right, interesting. Now, let's take a look for just 1 second and see what the Septuagint has to say. It says something slightly different. In verse 1, "And I turned and lifted up mine eyes, and looked, and behold, a flying sickle." Okay, well, if we look at the underlying Hebrew there, this word for sickle is this word Megillah. Now, Megillah is a word that is very well known in the Hebrew. It means roll, and it means roll as compared to a scroll. Now, a scroll is an item that has, two scrollers. It has one here and one here, and you unscroll the scroll. But a roll has just the page, and you have a single handle, and you open it this way, and you read the roll. It's a roll, not a scroll that has two. It's just one, a roll. So a Megillah, and so for instance, in the Et Cefer, you're going to find that we have a section called Et Megillot, which are these scrolls, like Ruth, like Judith, like Hadassah or Esther, and some of the other scrolls. Those are rolls. Those are rolls, not scrolls, and they're known, like Kehilat, Kohelet, and Kina, Lamentations, Ecclesiastes. Those are rolls, not scrolls. Rolls, not scrolls. And so when we're talking about a roll here, we're talking about a Megillah, not a sickle. But even nonetheless, the Septuagint interpreters said, well, behold, it's a flying sickle. And he said to me, What seest thou? And I said, I see a flying sickle, and the length 20 cubits, and the breadth 10 cubits. Okay, so everybody's agreeing that the length is 20 cubits and the breadth is 10 cubits. All right. Now, in the Et Cefer, it says, Then I turned and lifted up my eyes, and looked, and behold, a flying roll. And he said to me, What do you see? And I answered, I see a flying roll. The length of it is 20 cubits, and the breadth of it is 10 cubits. Okay, so we're all agreed. We're all on the same page here. And in the Et Cefer, it goes on to say, Then said he to me, This is the curse that goes forth over the face of the whole earth. Now, the whole earth there in the Hebrew, again, is this kol eretz. So it's the whole earth or the whole land. The whole land. Okay, often translated as the whole earth. For everyone that steals is innocent according to her, and everyone that swears is innocent according to her. Well, But I will bring her forth, says Yahweh Tsevaot, not the Lord of hosts, but Yahweh Tsevaot. Again, the sacred name is set forth in the Et Cefer. And she shall enter into the house of the thief, and into the house of him that swears falsely by my name. and she shall remain in the midst of this house, and she shall finish it at its timber and at its stones. Okay, so you see that this role here is going to stay in the house of those who swear falsely by the name, Hashem, and those who are stealing. Well, that's another issue, isn't it? Those who are stealing. Those who are stealing and those who are swearing falsely by the name. Now, here's where we get into the substantial change-up. Then the angel that talked with me went forth and said to me, lift up now your eyes and see what is this that goes forth. And I said, well, what is it? And he said, this is the measure that goes forth. Now, the measure again here, they use an ephah in the KJV. And over here in the, and this is what we get in the Septuagint. And the angel that talked with me went forth and said to me, lift up thine eyes and see this that goes forth. And I said, what is it? And he said, this is the measure that goes forth. The measure that goes forth. Now, the measure, I think, is an important word here because we talk about ephah. Ephah really is a measure. It's some kind of a measure. It's not something, but it's some kind of a measure, some kind of something that fills, if you will. Okay, this is the measure that go forth, he said, moreover, and this is how they appear throughout all the earth. They appear as a roll. They appear as a roll that's 20 cubits by 10 cubits around. Now remember, you remember the old pi r squared or whatever it is that you would use to figure the circumference. So when you're measuring around this thing, it's 10 cubits. All the way around is 10 cubits, but all the way up is 20 cubits. Okay, and behold, there was lifted up, this is in the Cefer now, in verse 7 of chapter 5. And behold, there was lifted up a disk of lead, and there a fire sits in the midst of the measure. Okay, so if this measure we're talking about is some kind of a hollowness, if you will, a place that can be filled. It's kind of like an empty barn or an empty silo, could be, but it's an empty measurement into which this particular roll that is 60 cubits tall, and 20 cubits tall and 10 cubits around, it sits in this measure. And this is how it appears all over the earth. They're under a disk of lead. And there a fire sits in the midst of the measure. Now people say, well, what do you mean a fire? Well, let's compare that to what you see in the KJV. And in the KJV in 5:7, it says, behold, there was lifted up a talent of lead, a talent, okay? And again, when you're talking about a talent of lead, this is kikar in Hebrew. And in kikar, this word actually means a circle, a kind of like a round loaf, of bread. Usually it means a circular region, a circular region like the circle of the Galil, for instance, the circle of the Jordan. But in this case, it's, you're talking about something circular. Now, the KJV interpreters, elected to say, well, it's a talent, right? Which is just a large coin. But we know that what they're trying to say is that something round, like a coin, is made of lead. However, the word kikar is a little bit broader than a coin. It doesn't mean a denari, a coin. It means something more that's a little bit broader than that. It means a circle, something similar to like a round loaf of bread, for instance. But this is, we believe that the proper word here is disc, Then he says, behold, there was lifted up a talent of lead, and there is a woman that sitteth in the midst of the ephah. Now in 5:7 again in the Septuagint we read, and behold, a talent of lead is lifted up, and behold, a woman sat in the midst of the measure. In the midst of the measure. Okay, so we're agreeing with the Septuagint on the use of the word measure, but we disagree on this use of the word woman. Okay? Because what you see is in this woman is you see the word Isha. Okay? Now, I see another interpretation in some of the Strongs where they point to Nashim, which would mean woman. But the word that appears here is actually Isha, not Nashim. And Isha, yes, it means wife or woman. But guess what it also means? Isha, let's see if I can find it here in the Hebrew. Isha, it also means sacrifice made by fire, and oftentimes just fire. Okay? Like in Strong's Hebrew 800, Isha, Strong's Hebrew 800, Isha, it means simply fire, fire. Isha, fire. And so the question is, when you look at Isha, and by the way, they're spelled identically. You have this Aleph Shin He in both cases, Aleph Shin He, and also bear in mind that at the time the text was written, there were no vowel sounds, there were no vowel markers. So you had Aleph Shin He, that was what appeared. And so the question is it woman? Is it a woman? Or is it a fire? Well, you tell me. I mean, when you read this version of the KJV, you're reading that there are two women in a basket. Two women in a basket. And as compared to a fire that sits within a measure, right? So Zechariah 5:7 in the in the Et Cefer reads, "And behold, there was lifted up a disk of lead, and there a fire sits in the midst of the measure. And he said, this is wickedness, and he cast it into the midst of the measure, and he cast at the weight of the lead upon the mouth thereof." That is to say, he cast this fire into this hollowness that's holding this roll, and he put a disc of lead over the top of it. Sounds conspicuously like a silo. Then I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, there came out two of them, two women? No, two fires. The wind in their wings, for they had wings like the wings of a stork, and they lifted up their measure between the earth and the heavens. Okay, now let's compare that to the KJV. In 5:9, then I lifted up mine eyes and looked, and behold, there came out two women. And the wind was in their wings, for they had wings like the wings of a stork, and they lifted up the ephah between the earth and the heaven. Okay, well, that's kind of interesting. It looks like two women, two winged women, coming out of this and lifting up the ephah, this measure, up to the heaven. It's a completely different image than when you're talking about a flying roll 20 cubits high, 10 cubits around, that is propelled by fire coming out of this measure that had a disc of lead over the top of it, and it has wings, and it's lifting up this measure up to the heavens. And then in Zechariah 5:10, in the KJV, then said I to the angel that talked with me, whither do these bear the ephah? And he said unto me, to build it a house in the land of Shinar, and it shall be established and set there upon her own base. And again, in the Septuagint, reading those same lines from 5:8 forward, and he said, this is iniquity, and he cast it into the midst of the measure, and cast the weight of lead on the mouth of it. And I lifted up my eyes and saw, and behold, two women coming forth, and the wind was in their wings, and they had stork's wings, and they lifted up the measure between the earth and the sky. And I said to the angel that spoke with me, whither do these carry away the measure? And he said to me, to build it a house in the land of Babylon, and to prepare for a place for it, and they shall set it there on its own base. All right, well, you know, there's a whole lot of construence that can go into this, but when you read the Et Cefer version, and I'm going to read here from 5:7 through the end of this chapter, and behold, there was lifted up a disk of lead, and there a fire sits in the midst of the measure. And he said, this is wickedness. And he cast it into the midst of the measure, and he cast the weight of lead upon the mouth thereof. Then I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, there came out two of them, the wind in their wings, for they had wings like the wings of a stork, and they lifted up their measure between the earth and the heavens. Then I said to the angel that talked with me, where are they causing this measure to go? And in verse 11, and he said to me, to build it a house in the land of Shinar, and it shall be established and set there upon her own base. Well, the implications of this prophecy could mean a lot of things. Some people are saying, well, that it clearly means that this is some kind of a missile that has the capability of destroying a house and to finish it. That is to say, finish it, its timbers, and to finish its stones. So you're talking about something a little bit more significant than, shall we say, an arrow. But we believe that the proper interpretation, notwithstanding whatever the interpretation may be of the prophecy, we believe that the proper interpretation in this passage is to use the word fire rather than women or woman. And because again the use of the word there is isha. And as a consequence, we think that the passage makes more sense when you're talking about using isha, interpreting isha as fire rather than woman. And so as you can see that you're talking about a roll here, that is to say a roll that's 20 cubits tall and 10 cubits around, sitting in some kind of a measure with a disc lead on top of it, a disc of lead on top of it. And you know, why would you put a disc of lead on top? Could be lots of things you could put on top. You could put a disc of iron, you could put a disc of plastic for that matter. Why would you have a disc of lead if it isn't containing something that is radioactive? And so you have a disc of lead, and in addition to this disc of lead, you have this something that has two of them. There's two of them that come out, which means there's more than one coming out. And they have fire that comes out, they have wings, and it lifts them up into heavens carrying the measure. Now, let's talk about this term measure for a minute. Suppose this measure is measuring the weight of the bomb that it carries. For instance, when we talk about a conventional bomb, you're talking about something that is expressed in thousands of tons of TNT. That's a 1-ton bomb. That'd be a 2,000-pound bomb. That's a 4-ton bomb. The mother of all bombs, which was a 20,000-pound bomb, or a 10-ton bomb, a 10-kiloton bomb, It was a 10-kiloton device that went off over Hiroshima. You know, you would talk about nuclear weapons in terms of 12 kiloton, 20 kiloton, 50 kiloton, 100 kiloton, 500 kiloton, even a megaton. The largest bomb ever detonated, the Tsar bomb, 67 megatons. They thought it was going to split the earth, actually, at one point. But you start talking about the bomb in terms of its measure. You talk about the bomb in terms of its measure. You don't say, well, there's, 16 ounces of plutonium located in this bomb. Or we have 100 pounds of TNT, or whatever it is, whatever the weapon may be. You're talking about the measure of its blast. And so the word there would be ifad, the word there would be measure. We're talking about a measure. What is the measure of this roll? You see, it's not measured by being 20 cubits tall and 10 cubits around. It's a different measure. And when this roll, when it comes out of this measure, it lifts its measure up into the heavens using fire and based on wings. It appears to be in a proper interpretation of this particular prophecy in Zechariah 5, which, by the way, is only found talking about it with fire at Cefer, that we're talking about a flying roll propelled by fire with wings, lifting up its measure to the heavens and coming out of the land of Shinar or Shinar. That would be Babylonia, Mesopotamia, even the land of Elam, which is southwestern Iran. So long and the short of it is it comes from the Middle East. So I think that's what the prophecy reads, and that's why we've set it forth in the Cefer, in order to give a proper interpretation to the underlying Hebrew. And I hope you're edified with this particular teaching. Come back and see us again. Stephen Pidgeon, signing out for the Cefer group and saying Baruch Hashem.